what do you want to become? What is that piece that you want to have? And part of that is we have to put positive in, because when you're an entrepreneur, a lot of times there's a lot of challenges that come your way, and not everything works out perfectly right out. But you have to be able to fight through that. So you have to climb, and you have to be willing to learn. And really, we learn from our mistakes. We all have heard that before. But the problem is, in school, they don't really teach us that. They give us grades, but they don't really tell you, how do you climb out of that? So to me, a mindset that's a climber is a person that's willing to learn, even when they have failures, even when they have setbacks, because then it's about reaching the next set. And a climber always sets goals. They're going to set parameters of where they want to go and where they want to be.
You're listening to the Rich State of Mind Show, the podcast made to make you the total package in the entrepreneurial world and give you what we call a rich state of mind. If you are here looking to learn about real estate investing, marketing, elevating your business, and developing your mindset to get to the next level, then you are at the right place. Stay tuned and be sure to join our community on richstateofmind.com. Now here's your host, Anthony Ritchie.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Rich State of Mind, where I'm talking to Gary Wilbers. He's been a successful entrepreneur his entire life. He's also known as the positive culture mentor. He shares the knowledge he has gained through his experiences to help individuals and organizations cultivate a positive culture that wins, to enhance people and performance, and to find their purpose in business and in life. This guy's got an amazing record. I love this conversation because we were able to pretty much focus on changing the culture, whether it's in your household, in your workspace, in your life period, into a positive one, so that you can perform to the best of your abilities and help others perform as well. I'm really big on influence and being able to change a room, right? When you walk into a room and you're able to influence people positively to bring the best out of everybody else. So this is pretty cool. Please check out this episode. Thank you for listening.
Hey, Gary, thanks for taking the time this evening. Really appreciate you being on this episode. If you could please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Well, it's exciting to be here. I call myself the positive culture mentor. And here's kind of my tagline. I really create a positive culture in individuals and organizations to cultivate that positive culture to enhance people, performance, and increase profits. And I think that's the key. First, we have to look at ourselves. Then we look to others. But to me, that makes the big difference, is when we cultivate that positive culture that we want to live personally as well as professionally.
And so let's talk a little bit. How did you get into that?
Well, I will tell you, kind of the way of the world now is we're negative. And I started listening to some other people that were sharing positive message. One of my mentors, John O'Leary, talks about being an inspiring leader. And really what I learned from that is when we are more positive, really it attracts people. Where negativity, to be quite honest, we get it all the time. And some of us may fall into that traps, but instead we want to follow someone that's positive. And I really found out from myself early in my career, I'll be honest, I wasn't a very good leader. I was a pretty demanding and hard driving leader, and I really didn't enjoy it. And when I started changing, working with my teams and was more positive about what they were doing, we started growing faster and was able to improve so much. And really what it came to is really when you help give other people what they want, you start to get more of what you want. And so it just really became a life model. And it's something that, I'll be honest, I have to work on every day, because of course we can go right down that trap, but you have to remind yourself, how can I be more positive each time? They say we have 60,000 thoughts in a day and 80% of them are negative. Isn't that sad? Yeah. I mean, instead, why not change that to where you become more positive? And I think that's the reason people listen to podcasts, is because why? They're trying to put the good in instead of separating those things that's out there in the bad. And that's why I loved your Rich State of Mind, because it's about putting that mindset in of what you want to become.
Do you think that the reason why we have 80% of our thoughts being negative is because it's what we consume?
I think some of it's what we consume, Some of it is, let's be honest, we're going to blame the media here. It's one of those areas because what we've done is we've tried to divide instead of what's made our country great is understanding there's two sides of every equation. And you have opinions about certain things. I have opinions, but the neat thing is that on podcasts, we can discuss those and we can agree to disagree. But in society anymore, that's not normal. If we disagree, then, oh, I don't like that person, or I'm not going to listen to that. So I'm going to separate myself off. And I try to always tell myself, I have to be able to listen to both sides. I may not agree, but maybe they have some points that I really should take in and consider differently.
That's an awesome perspective that I wish, everybody had. It would actually make discussions a whole lot easier. And then obviously there would be no such thing as arguments.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I want you to explain this mindset that you have and how you've turned that into the businesses that you built.
Okay. I call it a high achievers mindset. That's just kind of my theme. And it's really, it's based off of the book Mindset that Carol Dweck created. And I kind of call mine is about the climber. What do you want to become? What is that piece that you want to have? And part of that is we have to put positive in, because when you're an entrepreneur, a lot of times there's a lot of challenges that come your way and not everything works out perfectly right out. But you have to be able to fight through that. So you have to climb and you have to be willing to learn. And really, we learn from our mistakes. We all have heard that before. But the problem is in school, they don't really teach us that. They give us grades, but they don't really tell you how do you climb out of that. So to me, a mindset that's a climber is a person that's willing to learn, even when they have failures, even when they have setbacks, because then it's about reaching the next set. And a climber always sets goals. They're going to set parameters of where they want to go and where they want to be. Then I think the other side of it is, if you're not a climber, you kind of get in that stuck mindset. There's too many people in our world right now in that stuck mindset. I mean, yes, we've had a pandemic for the year and a half, but the thing is what are you doing about it? Are you allowing that to live your life, or are you living your own life? And what are you doing to move forward each day? And that becomes the real key, because when we realize that we are the key to our success, that it first starts with us before it starts with anyone else, we're able to accomplish more. And I just hate it when I see people get in the stuck mindset. And some of that stuck mindset side of it is just the words they use. I can't do that. I won't be successful. I can't, all of those things, saying why they cannot, versus that climber is saying, I've got to figure a new way out. I've got to go a new path. That didn't work, so I've got to try something else. And they're willing to try new things. And I think that's really the difference. And the way I came up with it, to be quite honest, I wasn't successful in all my businesses, so I made mistakes, but I always told myself I have to learn from my mistakes and then move forward. And in business and in life, that's really the key. We've got to learn from our mistakes and then decide how do we want to move forward and continue on. And that becomes the key. When you get that, then you get a difference. You kind of get that rich state of mind that way.
Yeah. And so I like how you said school talked about grades, right? And I think the best way to learn, and this is from a book I read, this will be probably like the third time now I'm mentioning this, because I guess it does correlate a lot of what I talk about in this podcast. So it's called the 1 Minute Manager. And it talks about how he provided redirects, or in the military, we do midterm counseling. Halfway through your evaluation, we give you some redirects on what you could do moving forward. And so that's how you best, encourage people to do better. But at the same time, you let them know, hey, these are the things that you need to work on. So then they're not walking out of the, either the counseling or the redirect, like, I'm stupid. Oh my God. How could I think to do such a stupid thing? Definitely something more positive. And then you also talked about I like the fact you talked about the mental roadblocks that we have. And so I want you to please, can you give some examples of how can people get encouraged to get out of that rut, even after their failures? What are some methods, some things that people can do to get out of that and start thinking a bit more positive?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I tell you, one of the things I would tell them to do is journal some. Okay. And you could sit there and just grab a journal. And I get people tell me all the time, well, I don't do that. I don't know how. Well, just ask yourself a question then. And then ask yourself, and if you've been in that rut, ask yourself that question. Why am I in this rut? And then let your hand and just do it. Don't do it by the computer, hand write it. And I don't care if it's just words, it doesn't have to be sentences, but let your consciously mind write something on that page. And it'll start to tell you a picture of what's there. So that's one thing I would suggest. The second one I would suggest is write some gratitudes of what is going right. Because sometimes we have a hard time, and I'm telling you, as an entrepreneur, we probably have a harder time sometimes than other people do of really appreciating the good things that are happening. Because why? We've got 10 more that we want to go accomplish. I know you have those, Anthony, just like I do. But the thing is, what happened today that's really positive? And you've heard this before, and that's nothing new that I'm sharing. But what's 3 things that's happened to you today? I do that each morning when I get up. And I write down those 3 positive things that happened yesterday. And a lot of times there's more than 3, but I highlight 3 of them each time and I write them down. And it just starts to change that mindset to set yourself up for that success. So those are 2 big ones I would suggest to anybody if they're trying to get themselves out of the rut, is really just journal some. And again, you ask yourself a question and just try to answer that question. And whatever's top of mind at that time. And then gratitude, and some people do it in the evenings. If it works better for you in the evenings, do it. For me, it's the morning that works best for me.
So perfect timing that you speak on this, because I think before we started recording, I told you about how I was banging my head against the wall with my wife. And so we just finished selling one of our properties. And so I did a 1031 exchange, so I didn't get taxed on the profit, right? But at the same time, I'm trying to put in offers for other deals and I'm getting outbidded. And so I'm like, all right, let's look at the book. What was the blueprint of the book of what we're supposed to be doing? And I look at, I mentioned all the things that we're doing and that we're actually on track. And I'm like, okay, it's not that bad. All right, let me just, thanks to my wife, she's just listening to me and just allowing me to just process everything. I get it all out. And then for me to come back around and to eventually look at the timeline that we had set out for our yearly goals and like, okay, we're good. And maybe that's something I would suggest to somebody that's trying to succeed. It doesn't have to be business. It could be any goals that you set for yourself. Write, journal, right? Write it out in a book. Hey, these are the things I want to do for the entire year, and then stay on track. And then the small goals will lead up to the big goals that you want to accomplish. So that way you don't feel so bad. So before I came on this podcast with you, I felt a little bit better because I went through my book and made sure, like, all right, okay, things are not so bad after all.
And the key there is you've written them out. And that's the one thing I will tell people. Don't put them up in your head. If you have goals, even if they're small ones, when you write them out, they become more concrete. I've seen it so much in my life. When I write something out, then for some reason it manifests us to be able to accomplish them. Where if you just have them up in your head, no, that doesn't do the same thing. So that's another great tip to share with people is when you're writing goals, write them out and handwrite them first. If you want them pretty, like today, I was writing up my 30-day action plan for the next month, but I wrote those out first, handwritten, and then I type them up to make them look good.
So speaking of goals, so you say you keep track of them through writing them down. Do you break them down into like daily goals as well?
I break them down. I go from my yearly goals down to what I call 90-day goals. Mm-hmm. And then I take those 90 days down to 30 days. And then I do action on those 30 days. What's the actions for this month that I want to do that will help me accomplish that goal? So it's breaking it down into smaller chunks, because the challenge sometimes when we do yearly goals and we say, whatever the number is, let's say we want to earn income and we say we want to earn $150,000. Well, that's awful big. Instead, when I start breaking that down to quarterly, and some quarters could be better than others, then I can break that down to monthly, what that looks like. The numbers just get so much smaller. In the same way, when I started reading books, I had never read 12 books in a year. And I wrote down that I was going to read 12 books in 1 year. Well, now I read about 30 books a year. But of course, if I would have wrote it down and said, okay, I'm going to read 1 book a month, well, then I was able to break that smaller chunk down each time. And then it came down to so many pages. It makes it so much more chewable. And everyone's probably heard the phrase, how do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. You make it smaller.
Yes. And that actually will help people with staying more positive with their goals, achieving their goals. Yes. Versus looking at this massive goal to do in a year. I want to make $100,000 a year. Start off by saying, okay, let's start off by making like $8,000 a month, and we'll go from there.
Yes,
So
it
that's
makes a
awesome.
big difference.
No, it does. It does make a big difference, and it allows you to not be so intimidated by what you're trying to accomplish. Because everybody, the American dream is still something people kind of go by on what they want to do, but it just seems so kind of far away. But with the proper procedures and put in place and mindset, obviously, it's possible.
I agree with you there.
And so since we're talking about positivity, right? So can you please explain to me, what is your positive culture blueprint?
Well, the positive culture blueprint is something that anyone can use, because I think there's four components to it that I say that practices really that you've got to implement. And the first one is improve your health. And what I mean there is physical health, spiritual health, and mental health. So of course, spiritual, that's what it is for you. So what is it spiritually that really gets you rolling and on that part of it? Physical health is pretty easy. That's your exercise. How are you tuning up your body, no matter what age you are? I'm 54, and this morning I ran 3.25 miles. Not very fast, I'll mind you, Anthony, but I did run 3.25 miles because I know physically that makes a difference for me to keep my body in shape. And tomorrow I will do exercise. I do at least 4 out of 7 days, normally 4 or 5 days a week of exercise, because it tunes up not only our body, but also our mind. And then that becomes the mental side. What are you doing to improve your health mentally? Are you reading? Are you journaling? Are you listening to podcasts? What are you doing to continue to learn? Because our bodies and our mind was meant to learn things. And as we learn, then that helps us. Whenever we think we've made it, that's when you're going backwards. That's when your life is going to start taking a shortcut. You were saying with your wife, I've been married for 27 years. Make sure I get this right because I'll get in trouble otherwise. 27 years. But the only problem is if I don't continue to learn on my relationship and just take it for granted, what's going to happen to our relationship? So what are you doing? Yeah, to start to dwindle. So that's number one. The second one is all about building your connections. Just what we're doing on this podcast. We're going to get done with this, and Anthony and I are going to feel like we have a new friend in each other by sharing on this podcast. So business relationships that you have, but also I believe it's very important, family and then friends. We've all heard that the 5 closest people that we're closest to, that's who we become because we start to work with them. Well, we have to look at it. You don't have to let those other people go, but if we want to become something different, we have to decide business-wise, who do I want to associate with? That's where I started joining masterminds and other groups because it'll help me improve my game back in the 90s when my business was stagnant. And it really wasn't the business was stagnant. I was stagnant. So what did I do? I increased my relationships in those areas. So what's your connections that makes a difference to you? The third one is grow your wealth. And that's business, personal, and passive. And you talk a lot about this on your own on this podcast, is how can you create other income sources? If you want to start a business, if you want to be a landlord, if you want to own some property and have some of that passive income. I've been fortunate in my life. I've got passive income now, and it's made a real difference. Now, I was fortunate. I'll be honest, I started accidentally in the buying duplexes and homes. But now that is a passive income that's come through because I've been in it for 20 some years. And that's made a real difference in my life. Now I still have business income that I create too. And I had a business, my primary business I sold at one point because I saw the times changing and I was able to get that revenue from that business. And it's allowed me to leverage that income to create other income in other sources. So I think personal wise, big key there is don't spend everything you make. No. Because the problem, otherwise you can be a very poor business person, a poor business, poor person. Instead, live within your means. And what do you want the long-term game to be? And of course, for myself, I want to be able to live comfortably as I grew older. And one of my goals I wrote down, I'll tell you, Anthony, a long time ago, I said I was going to retire when I'm 50. I'm 54 today. I could retire, but I'd be bored. Yeah. I'm now following my passions though and doing what I love. I get to be on podcasts like this and I get to share knowledge. So that becomes my passion. So that's number 3. And the last one is increase your contribution. And that's really just the time, talent, and treasure. Where can you give your time? Where do you want to give your time? Where do you want to give your talent? And where do you want to give your treasure? What organizations do you want to help? Because what made this society so great is we're willing to help other people. And one of my big ones is Special Olympics. I've been involved in Special Olympics, Missouri since 1994. And I give a lot of time, I give a lot of talent, and I give some treasure to it. But I feel like I get more back in return than what I ever give. And I think that's what we're meant to do here on this world, is to give to others.
And so speaking of contribution, my wife and I discussed thing about doing scholarships. So like Rich State of Mind scholarships for college, just a way to give back. And because I joined the Navy because I couldn't afford college, and so provide people the opportunity, provide a paper, maybe do some community service, some type, submit some type of package, and to provide that type of opportunity for them. When you talked about improving your health, I like the fact the key thing that you were talking about was consistent productivity, right? Reading, working out, right? Reading is your mental, physical was, working out. And I forget the third one that you had said. Spiritual. And that is, obviously whatever, you may see fit, but that's all those three things is you staying productive in order to maintain your health. And I'm really big on that. And I think people, if you ever feel yourself just sitting there, just kind of like wasting away, that should make you kind of think, all right, what could I be doing right now that could be being a better service to me, which then obviously be a better service to my family. And if you're a parent, to your kids. And I think all those three things is definitely important, because we just had a newborn actually about 3 weeks ago. And so
congratulations.
Yeah. So I am 30. By the time her name's Isabella. By the time Bella is 15, I'll be 45. And I would like to still be able to run 3.2 miles with her, when she's like in track or anything like that at that age. So Usually I wake up, it's funny you say that, because usually I wake up about 5:30 in the morning. I run 2.5 miles. I don't do it 3.2, but but I try to stay in decent health as well. Try to make sure that we read, and we try to foster that in the home. And so that's something I also would like to tell people. Try to foster that that culture in your household. So it's not just you that's doing that; it's also your kids, or your partner, so that everybody is on the same page. And so we can have those intellectual conversations at the dinner table, and talk, hey, did you read that, such and such book about, mindset, or hey, about building wealth. So I really love stuff like that. And in a perfect world, that'd be a great dinner table discussion.
I agree with you. And I tell you, I know already that you'll be in good health because you have a why, because you said why you wanted to do that. Because if Bella's running track and stuff, you want to be able to do it with her. That was the reason. That was my why. I actually lost 75 pounds. I was 275 pounds back in November 18th of 2002. Not that I can remember the date, but I know the date I went to that gym and said, this is going to change. And it was because I had 3 young children. And I knew if I wanted to be active with them, I had to make some changes. And the stress of work and everything else was getting to me in my businesses. And when I started exercising, it all changed. I could see things more clearly. I had more energy. I was more productive. All those things you talked about.
And I love the fact that you also talked about building business relationships. It's starting to not be to the point where I can't count on my fingers how many times a business opportunity has presented itself because of this podcast, or because of running into other people out in town, and providing good business relationship and transactions. They remember that. People remember that. And so later on, they remember, like, what, I did good business with that individual. I had a situation that just happened last week where a contractor, they said they were booked out, and my wife was trying to schedule. We were trying to get one of our units painted and get a new flooring. And they were like, hey, we're booked out till October, but we'll take down your name and information and, go from there. So there was like, my wife was like, my name is Amira Ritchie. She was like, is there any way that you're related to Anthony Ritchie? She's like, yeah, that's my husband. You know what? We'll fit you in. We will definitely take care of you. And I pride myself in keeping integrity, whatever business that you do, keeping integrity what you do, and be genuine, because people feed off of that. They understand, like, all right, this person actually cares. I could trust this person with my money or my time or resources. And obviously we'll continue to thrive, and it's a win-win. So I like the fact that you talked about that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And the reason you're successful with it is just because of the words you said there. You want it to be a win-win both ways. It's not
Yes.
a win-lose proposition. We want win-lose in football, in sports, but in business, we should be looking for win-win opportunities, because then both parties win, because that other party has to make money. We don't want them to make all of it on us, but they have to make money. And when you look for win-win relationships, there comes great business relationships come out of that.
Yes. And then for growing wealth, so I will say this, not everybody is going to be a millionaire or a billionaire, but you spoke on the fact that at the age of 50, you could have retired and lived comfortably, right? If somebody can at least aspire to get to that point where they can live comfortably for the rest of their days and not have to work at a job that they don't like, or at least doing hours that get uncomfortable the older you get, then I would say, you were successful and you was able to not have to work because you have to versus because you want to. And I would say that's definitely possible. And you could do it at a slow pace. You could start from 20 to 50, and you don't have to, scale up to 100 units in 3-5 years, like you hear some of these stories on the podcast. You could do it slow and steady and work your way up. If retiring at 50 is still very young. Yeah.
And that's the thing. And then you get to really live your passions. That's what I feel like I'm doing. And the thing is, I'll tell people is realize the amount of money they need is different for everyone. Some people would be happy if they've got $50,000 coming in. Other people, it's 100,000. For others, it's $250,000, but remember, it's about what you're spending and then what you're saving and how are you putting that away? And then what are you creating? And then when you're creating passive, like what you're talking about on this podcast, then that really makes the big difference. Because when you create passive income, it keeps coming. And that's the really good part about it is, my rentals, I still have some responsibility for them, but I have a management company managing them. So the nice thing is, to be quite honest, unless it's a big expense, I don't get a call for the small things like there's a toilet that needs to be fixed. The management companies handle that. So that becomes the real key. You have that opportunity. And in this day and age, it becomes a great opportunity. Start small, just like you said. I agree with you there, Anthony.
Yes. And so as you progress, I do agree with starting to delegate, like you said, with property management. And so for me, like I've used property managers, and then I've also managed my own properties as well. Depending on the situation, so a single family home, I can manage. Yeah. But when I start doing with the multifamilies, it does work out to definitely have a property management team. So, but one thing I wanted to also put on too is that you talked about identify what is let's just say your good retirement amount. So you said some people are good with 100,000, some people are good with 50. Everybody doesn't have to shoot for $300,000 a year. Right. If I live in, what's a very cheap area?
Jefferson City, Missouri.
Okay, let's say I live in that area. I don't need what somebody retiring in Los Angeles, California would need. And so just to keep that into consideration. Some people, they don't require a bunch. Hey, I'm good with especially if it's just, they're empty nesters. Hey, I just need a 2-bedroom, 1 bath. That's all I need. I don't need to have a crazy luxurious lifestyle to live comfortably.
Yeah. And we're creatures of a lot of stuff. The thing, and you're seeing that more and more people are saying, I can do without less, because instead I want the experiences. I want to be able to see different areas of the country. I want to be able to travel. So you don't need a big home then if you're not always there. And that can reduce a lot of cost. But you have to just kind of discover over time what works for you. And if you're married, your spouse, and for your family. And that becomes the real key.
And this is why, I've talked about renting later on in life and not owning. So that way I'm just going, anything wrong with the property, obviously I call the property manager this is my primary residence. So just something to think about. I know a lot of people, they're big on owning their home and, living in it. But I would like to, as I get older, the only expenses I want to really worry about really is the properties that make money. And then whatever we're renting out, we're just living there. And we could just leave in a year. I'm not tied down to a mortgage because I just put down 25% down. And I'm like, oh, if we sell it now, we're going to be underneath. At 60, I don't want to be worried about that stuff,
Exactly. Don't want to have to cut grass. In Missouri, there's a lot of grass to cut, or we have snow. You don't have to worry about those
Oh
types
yeah,
of things.
you do. And so, okay. So I want to make sure before too much time passes, I want to talk about your books. So you're the author of 4 books, which is great. So let's talk about I wanted to talk about the one that is a book about higher achiever leadership formula, the one that had that.
Sure.
Could you please break down, or first talk about what those 6 formulas are, and then we'll break down each one of those.
Okay, sure. Kind of the formula out of that book, and really what inspired me of that book was really what I learned being in business for 22 years before that time frame. And what I decided is everything kind of comes to the pieces, and some of the pieces we talked about, like the high achiever mindset. That's actually the first chapter in book. First, you got to get your mindset set as a leader and as an individual. And one thing is, Anthony, the way I look at people, everyone's a leader, because first we're leaders of self, and then we lead other people. But the thing is, you're a leader. And I normally ask this question when I go out and speak, and I tell people, raise your hand if you're a leader, and I'll set them up a little bit better than that. And most people, you only get the people that's got a title raise their hand. No, we're all leaders. So we have to realize that, because first we're leading ourselves. The second one is the leadership time solution. And it's really about having a solution to time. We all get 24/7. It's all the same. Everyone gets the same 24 hours. How does Anthony do this podcast? How does he do everything that he's got going right now? Is because he makes the time for it. You know, there's other people that just make excuses, and we can get a little deeper in that one. The third one is the leadership communication loop. We've got to be a good communicator. It doesn't matter if you're in business or what. We're sharing on this podcast. If we weren't very good communicators, you all wouldn't listen to the podcast. Hopefully we're communicating a message to you that you hear, but also communicating with our spouse, the people that are important to us, all those type of things. How are we communicating those individuals? And then it's about the influence and trust builder. How are we building influence and building trust with not only our relationships, but the people that we meet each and every day? And in the business sense, you talked about that, how important that is, because if you're not, your integrity, and if you're not building that influence, and you say one thing, but you totally do a different thing as a leader, same way with your children. If you say, oh, you need to do this, but you do just the opposite, they're not going to listen to you. So it's building that influence and trust. And then something that happens a lot in the workplace, it also happens in family, is the conflict resolution system. And a lot of people do not like to handle conflict. And I won't raise my hand and say, I love doing it. But the thing is I've heard a speaker before say, Leanne Davies shared with me, you have to be uncomfortable before you can ever be comfortable in conversations. So you have to have that uncomfortable side of it. And then the last one is really in the business sense, is I call it the strategic organizational playbook. But really what it comes down to, it's goals. And then it's setting the KPIs, which is your key performance indicators, to know how you're achieving those goals. And when you have a business, you want your whole team to know that, because they're all helping you bring you forward and helping you achieve those goals. So you'll have your personal goals, but what's your company goals? And then do you have measurements that you can see how they're helping bring that forward? That's when my business really kind of took off. When we started putting our company goals out, and then we align those with each different department and then each team member. Well, then guess what happens? You know, sum becomes a lot greater. When you create synergy, then the sum doesn't become 1 + 1 = 2. Instead, 1 + 1 becomes 10 or 100 or 1,000. Because as you put that together and you get everyone working together, you're able to achieve more than you ever thought was possible. So the book kind of capsulates those 6 key areas.
So I wanted to first talk about the time management. And I think that is huge as far as real productivity, because you talked about working out earlier, right? We talked about applying your spirituality, talked about spirituality, we talked about mental health, and then we also talked about making sure that we PT or physical train. So you got to make time for that. On top of that, you got your business. On top of that, you have to spend time with family. And you only have the 24 hours of the day. So what does that require you to do? Probably not spend 5 hours binge watching Game of Thrones, or,
Right.
or looking at some type of, VH1, some reality TV show. Probably requires you maybe to wake up a little bit earlier than other people. Maybe sometimes go to bed a little bit later than others as well. Eventually, I've seen it to where you could work it out to where you have a system to where you're not burning the midnight oil, but definitely requires a lot of structure. Some may say it's boring that way, but I like it that way. And so you talked about how people make excuses. And so what's some excuses you've heard before?
Oh, the best one is, of course, I don't have time. That's the
Yeah.
one everyone, when I started exercising, and I still get that today, tomorrow morning, I'll get up at 4:45 for a 5:30 morning body pump class. And they'll say, oh, I can't do that. So a lot of it is, I can't do that. So right away with their mindset. No, do I love getting up at 4:45? No. But do I love the results that I do it consistently at 6:30 in the morning when body pump's over? I love the results. But the thing is, we have to train ourselves to do that. But a lot of them is as excuses that it's really internal. I don't have time. No one's going to watch them. It's deciding what works for you. But I think the biggest key is you have to schedule it. And, we all run by a calendar, and most of us use our phones now for our calendar. And we'll put important dates on that calendar. Well, you have to put those important dates for yourself. That's so important. And I kind of call a philosophy or a system I created was the PRO system. And what that is, what's your peak productivity time? The R is for recovery time, and the O is for office time. So peak productivity, what's the most important things for me? And I can do that personally as well as professionally. Today, one of my most important pieces was to be on here with Anthony to record this podcast, Rich State of Mind. Because if I wasn't here, then he would be saying, wait, you set this up, but what are we going to do? Then we'd have to try to work and reschedule it. Or if he may say, sorry, you didn't make the first one, you don't deserve another opportunity. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to make sure I was here for this opportunity. So that's peak time. What's your most important time? Peak time this morning was when I exercised, when I went and ran that 3.25 miles. That was peak productivity time for me. The recovery time, we all have got to have some recovery time. I went to lunch today and had a good conversation with a friend. So what is that recovery time? Tonight, when I go home, I'll have some recovery time. I won't work the whole time tonight. When I leave, I'll have some of that free time that's available to me. Some people call it free time. And then the O is office time. When are the things do I have to get the other things done? Like, we're still in this time of year where we've got to cut grass. So sometimes it's personally that I've got to do. Other times it's office time, just cleaning up emails, making sure I'm prepared. And what is those things that I need to do there? But a pro, and the reason I always say this is, if you find the best athlete out there, and one that I always use as my example, Anthony, is I use Jerry Rice.
Oh, okay. Why that?
Jerry Rice was an ultimate professional. And one of the stories I read on Jerry Rice is when he was in his later years, one of the rookies asked if they could train with him over the summer. And the first time he went out with him, Jerry Rice was running the hills. He was out there early, and about an hour, 2 hour, hour and a half into it, the young guy was puking. He couldn't handle the pace that he was up. And he asked Jerry when they were taking a break, he says, Jerry, why do you do this? You're like the best there is. And he said, that's why I am the best. Is because he's willing to do the hard things, the training, because then when he gets in the camp, he's ready to go. When he gets in the game, it's automatic. It's not the later time frame. Instead, he's the ultimate pro. So if you want to be a pro with your schedule, if you're 24/7, you've got to be a pro in that area to really dominate that time. Otherwise, guess what? Time just passes by, Our hour is going to go really quick here. Another hour is going to go, and that 24 hours passed. You're never going to get it again.
And so one thing that I've noticed that works for me is I try to focus on 1 to 2 things at a time, nothing more than that, or I will literally be walking around in circles and be like, Anthony, what are you doing right now? And so for that hour that you blocked out, let's say to focus on your business. Okay, what is it within that hour you need to really focus on? And if, okay, let's say it takes you 30 minutes to do that. Okay. And then the other 30 minutes, the last final 30 minutes, you focus on that. That's how I found myself best effective. I'm not going to say that multitasking doesn't exist, but I will say if you try to do too many things at the same time, you will have hour would have passed and you're like 30% done with everything.
I agree wholeheartedly with there and then you should take a short break. They're saying now every 50 to 60 minutes, we should take 5 minutes in between, and then we can reset ourselves and say, okay, what do I need to get accomplished in that hour? Because the problem is we sit way too much today, and we're meant to move a little bit more. And as you age, like me, you've got to move a little bit more. Otherwise the back starts to hurt. So when you do that, then that really allow you to reset. Maybe just grabbing a glass of water, taking a walk around your home, walk outside real quick around your house or home, wherever you're at, and then get back after it. And that really makes a difference.
Another thing you mentioned was being a communicator as a leader. That is one of the biggest things in the military that I have experienced. The biggest complaint from junior guys is, hey, my upper leadership does not communicate. I find out last minute that this is what we're going to do, or they don't say anything at all. It just happens, and we're supposed to just roll with it. And especially in today's world where the millennials have a different perspective on how the office or just how pretty much any hierarchy is supposed to work out, they definitely want to be informed. They want to be a part of the bigger picture. They want to be in the know. They want to be a part of the big picture. But I think a lot of old school people are used to not sharing that information. It's just like, hey, just do as I say, keep it pushing. But I believe being a big communicator and sometimes being transparent is definitely effective in today's leadership opportunities.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly with you there, because communication is the key. It doesn't matter if it's in business or if it's in your personal life. If there's not enough communication that's happening, then the other person is kind of left out. And that's the thing is, what do you need to communicate with them? I understand there's some things in business sometimes, and I'm sure even in the military, you can't tell everything, but you can tell the pieces that you can talk about. What is most important, and that becomes the real key. And I've seen it all the time. And one of the things that's always interesting when I get called into businesses, Anthony, I'll get people, they'll kind of say, oh, we're having issues in these areas. And it's amazing. About 80 to 90% of the time, they won't say it's communication, but communication is the number one challenge that we have in business the majority of the time. Because why? We're not sharing enough of that information. We're not keeping them informed enough of what's happening. And the other problem we have as leaders, we are sometimes sitting around those conference tables and we're hearing them all the time. But the problem is we tell staff one time and we think they're supposed to automatically get it.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, you have to keep repeating what is that message you need to share with them.
And that kind of segues into building trust, because when you communicate, you build trust. And once you have a staff that truly trusts you and they will have no problem putting in that extra hour for you. You may require it and you may ask of it, but I bet you get a whole lot more work out of them, or at least better quality work if they actually believe in you and they trust that you have their best interests at heart and for the team.
Yeah, you'll definitely see that. And what it does, it builds the influence also. So when you build trust, you build influence. Them two go hand in hand. And that's why I made that chapter of influence and trust. Because when your influence grows, what happens? You're affecting more people. You're making a difference for others. And I think that becomes a real key, and it builds trust, because now you're a trustworthy leader. Instead of just having trust, you become trustworthy.
Yes. Awesome. I like the fact that you pinpointed on that. And I love this episode because we do talk about mindset a lot, but I like the fact that we are intertwining mindset with leadership. Because like you said, everybody is a leader in some way, even if you're the lowest down to the burger flipper to the admiral, or a CEO, everybody has the opportunity to lead by example and hone in some of those intangibles that will be required of you as you go up in, ranks or any type of hierarchy occupation. So I think this is awesome that anybody, even if you're 18 years old, 17 years old, you could take this in, or if you're 55 years old, you could take this in as well. Obviously things will, you will fine tune things as you mature and go through certain experiences, because I do believe sometimes I am able to deal with particular situations a bit better because I have experience in my field versus somebody that just off of theory, they know, oh, this is what I read in my book, what I was supposed to do. But sometimes when you get that, we call it on-job training, when you get that live action, it's like, all right, whoa, because you get to feel the emotion behind it. You get to see the gears turning between everybody that you're interacting with, how they're all reacting to what you just said or did.
Yeah, that's for sure. And that's the thing is, and I love what you said. It doesn't matter what age you can learn, because I said, I'm 54, I'm still learning every day. And that's what life is really about. You know, there's never an end to education. Sometimes it's more about self-education than it is real true education. Both are important, I'll give that. But the thing is you've got to continue self-education as you continue on, because if you don't, that's part of what makes up our body and our mind. That keeps us fresh. It keeps us young. It's how I plan on living till I'm 85 to 90, you know, is by keep learning. Because when we stop learning, then we stop living, really.
I agree. And so I want to make sure that we talk about this. You have a podcast as well. And so
I do.
Charge Podcast. So what made you call it that, for starters? Let's go with that. Well,
it's an acronym that I have, and Charge is an acronym of create habits around real goals every day.
Oh man,
and
that's awesome.
So when I looked at it and was thinking about starting the podcast, I said, well, you know, I've used that acronym. I've kind of really keyed on that because I believe it's about real goals every day, because it's the small little things. Like I said, if I'm going to get up early to exercise, that's a small habit. But when I win that little goal that day, it makes a difference for me. If I get up and I journal and I write my 3 gratitudes each morning, I'm winning that little piece aside. Well, when I get enough wins of them small little goals, guess what happens in my life overall? More things tend to go in my favor. Because why? I've set myself up for that success. And so when I started the podcast, we kind of kicked around different names, I'll be honest. And then I looked at Charge one day and I said, why aren't we calling it Charge? You know, and I say in business and life. So I'm a very much a business person, but you know, I want people to succeed in business, but I also want them to succeed in life. Because what does it matter if you have everything and everything at home is failing? If you lose your family and they don't like you even as a father, or your wife, you get divorced and stuff. Well, number one, it's harder to build wealth if you get divorced. Let's just be honest. The numbers are out there. If you're trying to make an impact to your children, well, when you stay together as a family unit, you can make a greater impact. But we have to do it. So it's about Charge. And it's been a lot of fun putting on the podcast. I'm sure as you enjoy doing your podcast, it's a lot of fun having guests on and learning different perspectives.
Yeah, pretty much every episode. I have been constantly learning. I've applied certain things as well to my business, whether it's through the podcasting, whether it's through, you know, just copywriting, creating content, and obviously doing real estate deals. And like I mentioned earlier, I've been able to work together with people in business ventures because of meeting people through here. Currently right now, I'm working with 2 people currently right now, and I met them through the podcast. So it's awesome. And it's funny, right? Like before we started talking, I was talking about the investing in the Midwest. And you're like, hey, well, I know people in the Kansas City area. If you need help, blah, 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 right? That is how it works. And you know what I love about this too? People are so willing to help. Like it probably does nothing for you, right? You probably don't get an affiliate, commission and anything like that, but you were just willing to pass on the information. And I don't, at any minute, Gary, if you said, hey, I'm looking at, rentals in Virginia, I'd be so quick to probably give you my real estate agent because she's so consistent. And I know that she would help you out. And so it's just stuff like that I really love. I really love this community because we're just so like, hey man, I got this information. I'm just going to give it to you. I'm not going to hold it back or charge you for it or anything like that. It's just to help. And it'll come back around. It always does.
Yeah. Well, it comes back to really, Stephen Covey talked about the abundance mindset or scarcity. And people that have abundance mindset, it seem to win a whole lot more than people that think, oh gosh, that's my plan. That's only me. I've got to hold it to my really close, don't want anyone else to know. And that's really the difference, is the more we give, the oldest book in the world shares that the more you give, the more you get in return, and that just truly comes out each and every time. I've seen it in my life. You've seen it already.
Yes.
And just be willing to give.
And so, speaking of giving and things that are very positive, what would you be considered your rich state of mind, your big why as to why you do what you do every day?
Really, it's about servant leadership. I kind of created my own purpose statement before, and it says, the purpose of my life is to be a servant leader, to live fully, energized with joy and presence, so that I can inspire others, give, love, and make a difference each and every day. But I've kind of redefined that purpose, that I want to be that servant leader. And if I'm willing to be that servant leader to help others, then guess what? The rest will come into play. And that's happened in my life. I can't tell you countless times. Now, I'll be the first one to say, Anthony, when I first started, that was not it. I was after success. I was after getting rich. I was after, all that thing, money. But I really realized, how do you define success? If you and I ask 100 people, we'd get 100 different definitions.
Mm-hmm.
But really, it's not about success, I've found out. It's more about significance. What do I want that significance to be in my life? And as business owners and people that's out there trying to make things happen, think about that. What do you want your significance to be? They say an average person, 20 people don't go to their funeral.
Wow.
So who do you want to come to your funeral? What do you want them saying? Oh, Dad, he never had time for us. Yeah, he left us a lot of money, but he didn't care when we were young. No, I want my children to say, my dad, they're going to have to define what that is, but he was my hero, whatever we want that to be. But I've actually written that obituary before of myself, and I know what I wanted to say. I can't put the words in their mouth, but I can sure live that way to help influence and make that become what they see out of me. But I think that becomes the key, is what do you want that significance to be?
You just reminded me of somebody that we had on our podcast. Name was Kayla Snaza. She talked about the dash in between the year you were born and the day that you die. And that dash, what did you do with that dash? And that dash means a lot. And what are people going to say about you in between those years that you were alive? What do you want to be remembered as, And I love the fact that you talked about at the beginning, you wanted to be rich, right? You wanted to, have this, maybe a lavish lifestyle and have all the success in maybe in a vain American, dream way. But as you got older, you realized what is more important. And as you can see, personally, it worked out for you with you changing your mindset. You still end up being successful in your own way. Success was relative, and you was able to identify that obviously before it was too late. So I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. Great summation. I appreciate that.
And then, so also, where can people find you? I want to make sure people can find you.
Sure. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Gary Wilbers. You'll find me on any of those. Please check it out, or go to my website, garywilbers.com. You'll see some great information there. I've got some information I'll be glad to share with you. And then I'd love to be able to give you audience, if they wanted to check out one of my books. I've got my latest book, Cultivate Positive Culture, that I'm willing to give them to them free. They do pay the shipping and handling at $6.95, but at the $20, you don't pay the book. But anyone on your podcast, and it's basically free. cultivatepositiveculture.com. So just go to free.cultivatepositiveculture.com. They'll just ask for your information. It will ask for your address and information there. You just pay the shipping handling of $6.95, and I'll mail the book to you for free. And if you have your name in there, leave me a little note, and I'll even personally sign it for you and send it to you and mail it to you. And it's kind of that book there has a fable, and then it's got 10 actions to faithful living, and things I've learned over the year that you don't have to do all 10 at once, but there are 10 different actions that if you want to live a faithful life, and a faithful life doesn't always mean just spiritual. It also means a faithful life with your family, your friends, your business associates, all comes into play there. I've got some great tools and resources I share in the book.
And that's also, I'll make sure that we also add the link at the bottom of the description. I really want people to check that book out. I think people should definitely be feeding themselves with information, especially if it's free. I'll definitely take it, right? And I always say, if you get one idea out of a book, then it was a good read. So
that's the key.
So it sounds like you at least have 6. You'll have 6 or 7 in yours. So definitely have to check that book out. I want people to also take advantage of this content, and then also look at your other 3 books as well.
I appreciate that, Anthony. And I will be sending you a book. I'll send you one. I appreciate you doing this podcast and helping others, because what you're doing is servant leadership, because you're sharing information that allows other people to really learn from. And I just thank you for giving your time and really making a difference to your community. Congratulations.
And thank you as well, Gary.
Thank you for sticking with us from the start of the episode. Please share our show with friends and family, visit our YouTube channel, and view more of our content on richstateofmind.com. See you next week on the Rich State of Mind Show.